To make an easy, small reed basket in the classroom, you will need reed for the spokes, reed for the weaving, a small flat round hoop, scissors, and water. If you watch me make this basket in the shorter videos that are silent and go step by step, you will remember that I cut the spokes to 18 inches. I decided I wanted the spokes a little bit longer, so I cut these to 20. I'm still using the half round reed, which is flat on one side. You can use any kind of reed that you want to for this. I like the half round because it's a little bit sturdier and more flexible than the thinner weaving reed, but really any will do. It comes in all different widths and thicknesses, and basically the thinner it is, it's cheaper, so that's one consideration. But also I find if it's too thick and stiff, it's hard on the students' hands. Of course, if it's really thin and flexible, it's hard to get the control that you need. The first thing you want to do is soak your reed for at least 5 minutes. As you can see, wet reed can bend really easily. Dry reed will snap, and that's not what you want. You can see here that this reed is perfectly dry, and so that makes a nice strong basket, but I soaked it all first. And that's what the water is for too. If you find that your reed is getting a little dry, you can just mist it or drop it in the sink or a bucket. I like to start my weaving using a ring. You can find lots of tutorials on how to start a basket by doing different crisscross methods. I don't like to use that with beginning weavers or students because it just takes a lot of hand strength and control, and the spokes slide around. We don't want that. We want to keep our spokes nice and steady. So I lay one reed down, one spoke, with the flat side up, put the ring on top, take another and go over, under, and over, all the way through. This is going to lock your base in place, and so your student will be able to put it down while they get their other materials without having to worry about the whole thing popping apart. So then I'm going to go under, over, and under. A lot of adjusting in the beginning. Let's see, I'll go, see. If you make sure they're all turned with the flat part going in the same direction, it will make for a nicer weaving. Again, you could use round reed for this part too. I just like the flatter reed to start. Let's see, it doesn't really matter how you do it, whether over, under, or under, over at this point. Want to get them all even and wiggle them around. How many reeds to use is also an open question. The more reeds you use, the stronger your basket is going to be. But of course, it is more to weave. I think that looks like a nice balance. I'm going to put one more in because I'm going to have to cut it in half. Okay, there we go. Now, if you are weaving back and forth on a cardboard loom, it does not matter how many lines you are going over. However, if you are weaving in the round, you have to have an odd number to make the weave automatically go over, under as you go around. So after you've loaded up your spokes, you can cut half off of one. And that's going to leave you with an odd number of spokes. Now, I don't want this big space over here, so I'm just going to adjust it a little. I also want a nice flat bottom. On this one, I made the bottom a little bit bumpy and it doesn't quite sit up right. So I want to make sure I can keep that bottom flat. In the beginning, there's going to be a lot of scooching and pressing to keep that flat. The scissors I like to use for basket making are called trauma scissors, emergency scissors. You can get a whole bunch of them on Amazon for pretty cheap. We call them super scissors in my classroom because you can cut through wire, metal, baskets, cardboard, anything. So these are my spokes, and now I'm ready to add my weavers. Now, the weavers are pretty long. Let's see, I don't even know if I can get it all in the camera here. I keep them soaking until I'm ready to pull them out at one at a time. You can cut these shorter to make them easier for the students to manage, but the shorter they are, the more you have to reload them. So depending on the size and dexterity of your kids, you can figure out what is a nice length. This is the length that came in the Reed package. So this is going to be the inside of the basket, but it really doesn't matter which way you start. You want the flat side to be on the inside and the round side to be on the outside if you're using a half round. To start, just put that in anywhere. Does not matter. Just stick it in there. And I'm going to go over, under, over, under. Now, I usually rehearse over and under with the kids before we start this. I like to keep it flat on the table while I'm doing at least these first rounds because it helps them see better. And there'll be a lot of flipping around. And I also can turn this, okay, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. Okay, now I'm back around. And then we go over. And this is the one where you really have to start watching to make sure that they are getting the over, under, over, under. If you have made an odd number of spokes, it should come really easily. Now, this part is going to be a little tricky depending on the age and experience of your student because they're going to want to weave way out here. You want to make sure that they're pushing all the way in with every spoke. It's tricky at first, and this is also why you want it to have it wet. It's not really pretty at the beginning. Perfect weaving is not going to leave any spaces at all, but as you can see, I have spaces there. It just takes a little time, up and down, around and around. If you get this far on your first day, you're doing good. What I like to do is just take a piece of masking tape, write their name on it, stick it there, or here, and then the next day you can come back and you just pick up where you left off, give it all a soak for 5 minutes, and pick up again. Let them get in whatever position works right for them. In fact, sitting on the floor might be something that works for them, especially because if they're too close together, they're going to be hitting each other with all of this reed. Now, one thing I'm doing at this point is I'm stopping to check, and you can walk around the room and push things tighter and straighten things out. But you see, in the beginning, when everything was kind of wonky, it did not look good. But now that I'm getting around and around, the mistakes sort of sort themselves out and they start looking better all the time. We're almost to the end of our first read. This is how long that first piece was. So, you know, maybe you want to cut yours into halves or thirds again, depending on how much space you have and how many kids. I'm going to show you a few things now. First of all, how you end. That's it. That's all you got to do. Just stop it wherever you left off. At this point, this is getting kind of dry. I've been working on it for a while. So I've got my spray bottle. I'm going to spray everything down because I'm going to start bending these spokes pretty soon. And I want to make sure that these spokes are wet. I already went and got my next weaver out of the water. Again, you want to make sure that they stay in the water until you're actually ready to use them because you don't want it to be brittle. When you take your next spoke, you just lay it right on top of where the last one was, and you can even double that up a little. So I'm going to pick up where I was. That's an over, under, over, under. And I'm going to go around at least once to make sure that that new one is secured in, and then we're going to start working on the sides. See, this is where I did this join before. I'm just going to go right over it like it wasn't even there. At the end, if you have anything sticking out, we're going to come and trim that up. Okay, so it is entirely up to you or up to your student when they want to start working up the sides. You could do it perfectly flat and make a mat and keep going. When you get out here, though, these spaces are going to be kind of wide. But most students want to start coming up the sides, and that coming up the sides is going to bend these together, so where it had started to spread out a little too much, that's all going to come straight. So if your reeds are wet, all you have to do is bend them. You could also use an upside down bowl to help them shape, but really you can just do it with your hands. If you want your sides to come at a sharp angle, straight up, you can do that. Or you could have gently sloping sides. Everybody is going to work differently because the slope is going to happen one stitch at a time. So this time, when I go the outside, I'm just going to push it in a little bit. I'll leave this one up a little. I'm going to come around the under one. I'm just pushing it up a little bit. One stitch at a time. And I'm still going under, over, under. And again, you need to make sure everything is nice and tight. See if I can change the angle a little bit here. So at this point, as I said before, you can start letting them stand up, move around, turn it upside down if that works better for them. You can see after a few times around, just pulling it in, it starts to stay in by itself. Now, you don't have to weave with reed or reed only. You can mix in yarn, string, wire, ribbon. You can do a combination of things. You can do just something for accent. The reed is really strong and stiff. It's going to give it body, but this will work just as well with any other softer material. The real important thing is that you've got strong spokes. You can't use, something soft like yarn or string as the spokes. You could use wire, but the technique is the same regardless of what you're weaving. And for, any of you that have done the card loom weaving or even the paper mat weaving, it's essentially the same, just over, under, round, and round. And maybe your kids are going to get that far and be like, that's it, I'm done. That's enough weaving for me. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to assume that you are working with middle school or high school, and we are going to keep going all the way up the sides. And, I cut my spokes to be the 20 inches this time just because I wanted to make it a little bigger, but you can always cut off the extra spokes. If you find that you are finished, you don't want to do any more, I'll show you how to, cut that off at the right length. So at any point, you could call this done. Just finished up with my second reed right here, and I'm about to add my third. You can see my sides are all well pointed up. I'm going to add my next one, and at this point I find it easier to just weave on the side. Okay, you see this is where this one is. I'm going to put that over, under, over. And at this time, I'm rolling it around in my hand sideways. You will find that as the process goes along, the way that you hold it, what's most comfortable, what works best, will change. And you definitely want your students to experiment with what angle is working best for them. You could, at this point, flatten your basket out and put a rim on it. You could push it further in to make it more of a circle. The shape of the basket is entirely up to you and how you do it, one stitch at a time. As long as you keep those spokes moist, you're going to be able to press them into whatever configuration that you want. So now I'm finishing up with my fourth weaver, and I think I've gone far enough. So now is the question of how to finish this basket so all of these weavers aren't going to slide off. There's a number of different ways to do that, including bending this straight over and weaving that in half, but that is not nearly as attractive as what I'm going to show you. First, I want to make sure that we are all wet. And I also want to point out how the weaving at the beginning, even though it was not the most attractive thing, is all sort of evened out and looks really nice now. I didn't do anything special. There's so many different stitches and twists and twining you can do, but this is just really the easiest and the most basic, especially for beginning students. So here we go. Got all of your spokes. Sort of get them limbered up there. I'm going to take my first spoke here. I'm going to put it inside and outside, and I'm going to press that flat. Now, because my spokes are so nice and flexible, this is very easy to do. I'm going to take this next one. I'm going to go inside lay it flat. Inside, lay it flat. Inside, lay it flat. All the way around. This is one of the reasons that I wanted to cut my spokes a little bit longer than the last one. Not only did I want to make the basket a little bit bigger, but the more spoke you have on the end, the easier it's going to do this finishing. I found I cut it a little short last time. Okay, so we've got this one laying down, we've got this one, and instead of just folding it over, when we fold it over, we are going to run it through the very first one. And then you have a nice, smooth, flat edge that is all locked together and not going to come undone. So this time, again, we're wet. I can do a little smushing and last shaping. And this is where these fantastic scissors come in. They are so strong. So I'm just going to turn this over, just easily snip off each one of these. I also have a few sticking out where I added them. And again, I'm just going to snip those off. While it's wet, it is very easy to adjust, push down, trim off anything you don't like. And then in really just about, oh, see, I was squishing it into shape and these two popped out. So I'm going to put that under, that under. I'm going to sneak that right back under. And while it's wet, that's no problem at all. And then this one, you know, is super strong. So we've got no popping out anymore. So it will just take really just an hour or so, and this will be perfectly dry and ready to take home.